Why do you often say you're fine even when you're not? Story 1. If I started saying what's wrong, I don't know when it'd stop. A lot of people would feel bad, and I'd most certainly feel worse. Sometimes not talking is better. Story 2. Because if I tell you I'm not fine, it inexplicably somehow turns into me trying to comfort and reassure you. No, it's not because of you. No, I'm not mad that you thought this was all about you. Well, you shouldn't feel guilty. I'm sorry you're upset now. Of course I still love you. I'm sorry for upsetting you, honey. No, I promise, I'm fine. Everything is perfect. Story 3. My entire life as a man, I've been taught two things. I need to be coming up with solutions to problems. And if I'm not useful, I'm useless. The moment I ask for help or show that I need help with a problem rather than being the one helping with a problem, I am then regarded as the problem. When I am the problem, I'm not useful, see above. Doesn't take a genius to see that vicious cycle unfold into some serious mental issues. Story 4. People don't actually want to hear about your problems. They say they do because they feel obligated to give a socially acceptable answer. Men are still held to anachronistic gender roles. Story 5. A lot of men say they're fine even when they're not because it's easier than opening up, especially in situations where they feel like they might be judged or don't want to seem vulnerable. It's often about avoiding conflict or being perceived as strong or in control. Society sometimes encourages men to bottle things up, which makes it harder to admit when they're struggling. It's a learned behavior, but more people are recognizing the importance of being honest about their emotions. Story 6. Because nobody actually cares whether I am or not. Nobody wants to hear if I'm not. They just want to hear. I'm fine so they can go on about their day with the knowledge that everything is right as rain. Story 7. Because casual friends don't want to hear why I'm not fine, and my wife has got her own she's stressed out about. Hearing my isn't going to do her any good. Story 8. 1. We can't fix it. You can't fix it. I can't fix it. Whatever it is, we don't have the means, knowledge, experience, or connections to fix the problem. 2. We don't want to cause ripples. By saying we are not fine, it opens the door to us venting potentially unwanted insight into our mental state. Insight that could harm your perception of us, kill the mood or vibe about us, cause people to view us differently, and isolate us from the few social connections we have. 3. You don't need ammo. Very often, almost comically often, when we do open up about how not fine we are, women will remember it and use it as a metaphorical low blow in an argument. Don't say, I would never. That's so mean. I can't believe you think it'd do that. Because you do. You always do. So to save us all the trouble and keep things par for the course, we are fine. Story 9. Anything I say can and will be used me in the court of an argument, manipulation, or other emotionally harmful ways. Also, no one gives a. I hide both physical and emotional pain because I've always done it. Hardest to hide was a broken hand that was swollen like a grapefruit because I thought it was nothing and I'm American and didn't want to pay for it. Or on rare occasion, I am actually genuinely just fine. Not happy, not angry, not sad, just fine. Story 10. Evidence of me not being fine will be used against me. Setting doesn't matter in my experience. One of my grandparents died during high school. I was very close with them. A year later, I was still not doing great, and the other kids were calling me an emo wuss to my face. And two of my teachers yelled at me to move on and participate in class. I was still doing great in school, just didn't care to engage with others much. In grad school for the health field, a close family member had a serious health condition, and I thought they were going to die. So I tried working remote. This was years before COVID, but it was fine. Yes, my work quality suffered, but was still generally good. It amounted to an extra round or two of edits on papers. I thought we were good, since they stressed balance and mental health since we were in the health field. Well, someone didn't like it and wanted me in the office. The chair rolled their eyes at me and said, if you can't handle your personal problems, I don't think a career in research is for you. Do you even want to be here? What is especially infuriating about my grad school experience is that a student had free rein to take a few weeks off after her cat died. I have more stories like the above. Near every man I know has, and it sucks. Having people not give a would be an improvement. Most men, at least in my experience, are taught it's expected you're the one to support, not to expect it. Although movements for men's mental health and opening up are in action, it's also an experience often shared that you open up and things get twisted, used against you, or you're thought of or treated as less of a man. I just think it's a bit of a Wild West RN to be more open as a male, which seems shared in the comments here, so for vast majority of guys, it's just safer to continue on keeping it to yourself rather than change it and get hit for it. Story 11. Because of many reasons. They might give advice that I already know but don't need or help, that they use it against me, that I will be judged and mocked, because thinking about it makes me full of emotion. I hate being weak and for someone else to take her place as my home. Story 12. 1. It will be used against me in an argument at a later date. 2. Everyone is instantly put off by a man who is not okay. 3. No one will hear me anyway. Story 13. Cause people don't care, and most times they use it to get back at you. Emotions are like bullets for men. You show them you have it, they shoot it at your head. Lol. Story 14. My best friend I served in Iraq with killed himself. I cried every night. My fiance complained I don't ask for help. I asked her to sit with me. She told me she knows I just sit out there and cry. She needs to prioritize sleep. I mentioned that I struggle with this specific thing because of an incident in Iraq that involved children. She responded, they were kids on the opposite side, so why should it impact you? I mentioned I struggle with sleep because of PTSD, and she dropped to her knees and clasped her hands and began shouting, "Oh, my PTSD! Oh, please, my PTSD!" This was the first and last time I mentioned PTSD in our relationship. I tried to explain my needs to her, and her response was, "We aren't discussing your needs until all mine are met." So, while some women may not be on this extreme, all women are on this wavelength. As men, we can be seen as your protector and desired, or as something vulnerable and discarded. We have to pick whether we want a relationship or a confidant. I have learned a woman can't be my confidant. Men need to confide in men, and let women dance in their field of emotional immaturity and bliss. Story 15. In my experience, giving voice to my problems invites others to examine my life and try to figure out why they are my own fault. If only I was more like them, I would not have these problems. If my friends, I just need to go to Friend Mart and get new ones. If my job sucks, I need to go get one of those 140K a year jobs off the top shelf at JobMart. If my health is bad, it's because I drink milk, don't drink milk, eat meat, don't eat meat, drink coffee, drink tea, eat sugar, eat aspartame, am on a keto diet, etc. If I'm depressed, I need to cheer up or exercise more or clean the house or sunbathe. If I'm fat, it's because I lack willpower and sneak out when no one is looking to snarf down 2 large Pizza Hut pies a day. If I'm skinny, it's because I lack willpower and give in to societal pressure to starve myself or purge after eating. Lack of energy is just me being lazy. Why would I be sick? They've not been sick a day in the last 20 years except the 4 times a year they are forgetting about. They just think it and they don't get sick. I must not be thinking, well, thoughts hard enough. Don't worry about dying. I'll go to a better place if I've been a good person. I so hate people right now. Story 16. We don't like to burden people with our problems if there's nothing they can do. Also, when I share, I wind up worrying about them worrying about me. Story 17. No matter how people spin it, the reality is men are ridiculed for speaking out on their issues. Side is massively skewed towards men because of this. Story 18. Because men are like cats. We hide our pain and troop on best we can. We also like belly rubs, meat with gravy, and get skittish when we hear you yelling. Story 19. I'm fine means I just don't want to talk about it. It's not that deep or complicated. It's giving the other person a way out of an uncomfortable conversation. Take the hint, lol. Story 20. If we're angry, we're scary. If we're sad, we're weak. If we're tired, frustrated, upset, no one cares. Buckle up and keep moving. It's easier to lie so whoever asked can feel good about themselves, and we don't have to deal with managing their emotions too. Story 21. Fake being okay, just pretend. Quote from my dad growing up. Don't get me wrong, he's an amazing dad, but that stuck with me. Fianca is usually understanding when I do bring stuff up, but sometimes I can tell it bugs her, so I clam up. Story 22. Because being emotionally vulnerable is generally not acceptable in American culture. Some people are open to it, but many, especially women, are not, and the consequences will be brutal and swift. Story 23. Because I have no other option. I have a wife and 2 kids to take care of, provide for, plan for, support, encourage, teach, and lead. I just don't have time to be not fine. Story 24. Despite what modern society says, the fact is that men are looked down on and viewed as weak when they do. Nobody wants to hear a man whine. Not to mention what we say will almost certainly be weaponized against us at some point. Story 25. Dear God, every guy here needs a hug, a lover, a good neighborhood bar, and then more hugs and friends. I'm a guy, but I've almost always had at least one extremely close share. Everything male or female friend and/or a very close romantic partner. And while I'm familiar with this sort of oppressive feeling that nobody cares, and that manning up is the only option, I don't think it's ever dominated my life so completely. Bummer. I think the really unhappy thing is all the guys in this thread validating that attitude as necessary and even good. It doesn't have to be like that, because no one actually cares about me, like I care about me. Story 26, because nobody will do anything about it. So no point. Plus, whether consciously or unconsciously, people lose respect for the complainers. Everyone's going through, so the ones who don't complain have a one-up on those who do. Story 27. Because if you say anything else, they are going to want you to talk about it. And now you have two problems. Just let me have the time to think and process whatever it is. Talking about things may well help, but maybe I don't want to do it now, or with that particular person. Story 28. Is this a serious question? Seriously? The answer is extremely obvious. We are simply old enough to know no one but our boys and our parents sometimes actually give a, not our GFs, wives, kids, no one. Young men just coming into the world are learning the hard way and having a hard time coping with it. Us older folks just accept it and say, I'm fine. The alternative is having people pretend to care and then take whatever is bothering us personally, like it was an attack on them. It's not worth having to explain and argue about. Story 29. Because we can't trust you. We don't want to hurt someone's feelings with what we have to say. It's something we have a solution for, and it just isn't a viable one. We don't want this moment or what we say in confidence to be used against us at a later date. We understand that heat is better vented upwards than sideways, meaning we don't want to take out our problems and frustrations on our loved ones and significant others. That's not fair to them. Most of us have been taught that what we feel doesn't matter. Many times, if we do open up, we get smacked back down for complaining, have our thoughts and feelings minimized, or worse, just straight ignored. The timing with which you ask us isn't good. We just need some space to ourselves to calm down. Because no one really cares, do they? We wind up consoling you for opening up. It's easier for all parties to just give that answer and disassociate for a while than bother you with problems. Suffering Olympics begins, and we are instant losers. Because we are usually looked down on for opening up. Say it with me. Be a man, stop being so weak, just get over it. Up, man up, grow a pair. Because what we have to say is embarrassing. Notice how far down this list it is. Sometimes, we just don't have any thoughts and are just fine. Because admitting to ourselves that we are not okay and are barely hanging on will bring our entire carefully crafted world crashing down around us. If we don't talk about the problem, it will not destroy us. Story 30. Because men are socially conditioned to mask their emotions. Feel down? Weak? Trauma getting in the way? Pathetic? Burnt out? Inferior? Have normal human emotions? Substandard. This is my basic understanding of it. I can't confirm this because I'm a woman, but from what my friends say, this is basically why they say they're fine when they're not. Story 31. Because quite frankly, society has done an excellent job with invalidating men's feelings. If a man wants to talk about how he's feeling, he's told to man up or stop being a. Or the few times I have mentioned how I'm feeling, it seems the other person is zoned out and not actually listening. I've grown used to not even bothering people. They'll get the standard living the dream. Story 32. Never once in my life was it beneficial to my mental health to actually discuss my problems with someone, especially a woman that I was seeing at the time. Anything I say will 100% be used against me in the future. Or it somehow always turns into some kind of upfight, where by the end I'm somehow consoling you about my problems. Story 33. Being British. It's because I know you're not really interested and are being polite. I only have conversations about my inner life with my husband and family because we're all engaged in a mutual support system which a stranger or acquaintance won't have an investment in. Story 34. We've learned that nobody actually cares about our well-being or mental state. Plus, our vulnerabilities are always weaponized against us later once expressed. It's easier and safer just to shut up. Story 35. Because socially, we aren't viewed as people worthy of emotional consideration. Ever. Any instance of emotionally opening up is an avenue for mockery, abuse, or worse. This is all compounded constantly by society at every level and across all creeds and ethnicities. Story 36. Two things. First, women and men talk about their problems for different reasons, and it's terrible how the two don't translate. Women just want the men to listen. Men are generally solution-oriented, and that's what they're looking for. Both are fine, they just don't translate. Second, women don't actually want to hear men be vulnerable for the most part. Not all women, but for the most part, showing weakness is unattractive to women. And we know that. For the most part, men are only going to talk to their mother, if that. This is also a bed that men have made, though, so to a large degree we've got to lay in it. Story 37. Because no one cares at all about how we feel. Some will still listen, but most not even that. Even if they listen, they are not able to offer help. I have a severe depression caused by my ex cheating on me. So what? I already know I am not the culprit. I already know there are more girls out there. I know I shouldn't think about her. I know all the theory, but it still hurts and nothing you say will make it stop. So why expose myself and my vulnerabilities to some if it won't do any good to me? That's the last reason. People don't take the mental health of men seriously, so if you have an issue, you'll be seen as someone weak. As simple as that. People will look at you with superiority, especially women and older men. Sometimes they'll even use it to attack us. In my personal experience, nearly all the times I've said, "I'm not fine," it has turned into a shitty experience. So I just hide it now and call it a day. Story 38. I don't like talking about my private life feelings. Feels like an invasion of privacy. If things got really bad, I'd go to a licensed therapist. Plus, the things I go through aren't really a big deal. I'd be different if I were into drugs or something and needed an intervention. Story 39. Because society doesn't care, to be honest. We are taught to handle our own issues, or suffer through them, or else we are weak. Weak to society, to romantic interests, weak as a person. So everything is fine. When I say it to people, it's because I know we'll figure out and make things fine, even if they aren't. Men have very few emotional resources, and even among those, most are fragile for one reason or another. It's best to just be fine until you break. Edit. For what it's worth, I tell other people everything will be fine too when they're hurting, because I believe in them. Believe they're strong, smart, or that the problems are temporary and will fade even if they hurt now. Story 40. This isn't a gendered thing. All people do this. It's a common staple of conversations. That's why it means so much when someone asks how you're really doing, not the pleasantries that you give to everyone else. Story 41. Because for the first 30-something years of my life I was taught, had it reinforced that if I had problems, I had to man up and stifle any emotion, all while I sacrifice whatever I have to in order to protect others. Many of us didn't choose to be this way, and are actively trying to change. Also, a big you to the people out there who then judge you when you finally do ask for help, and, instead of helping, offer judgment and bullshit. It's been a long day. Say I'm annoyed by a thing. Typically, the fact that I'm annoyed at a thing becomes the problem, and the thing that I'm annoyed at gets ignored and goes unresolved. Sometimes it's easier to just not make a fuss and say you're fine. Story 42. While a lot of the comments here are brutal, and in some cases my concern is warranted, often some things I think about are 1. It's the end of the day. I'm exhausted and just want to get to sleep. I'm not ready for a lengthy discussion. 2. I'm still figuring out how to concisely express what's bothering me. When it involves an issue with someone else, wording is absolutely critical, so I may need more time to be able to accurately express my feelings. I think my second point has some overlap with other sentiment of what I say can be used against me. Annoyingly, when having a conversation and when you try and express, "I am not fine, but I'm not ready to discuss it right now," that leads to conversations where the other person is trying to drag it out of me, which isn't particularly helpful either, but is a completely fair reaction. Story 43. Because, down to it, nobody cares. My problems are usually a jumping-off point for people to talk about what they're going through, and I wind up trying to support them or talk them down from a ledge. They walk away feeling better. I'm in the same place. Story 44. I've been in therapy for years. When I had a breakdown, instead of reassuring me and helping me, they wanted to tie me to a bed and drug me for the rest of my life. I can't even be vulnerable in front of the person whose job it is to accept vulnerability without endangering my physical integrity. Story 45. Men tend to be problem solvers and independent. If they can't fix it, doubtful you could. Also, it had been drilled into men's heads for time immemorial that showing weakness of any kind gives women the ick. Story 46. The best people can do is empathize, sympathize with me, and put a band-aid on things going on. I either have to fix things or accept things by myself, one way or another. Story 47. Anything you share will be turned against you. Your significant other will think you weaker and never shake that feeling again. Nobody actually gives a, "Did I hit them all?" Story 48. There's a scene in the movie Gran Torino that sums it up perfectly. "Hey there, Kennedy, you drunken Irish goon. Howdy are ya? I'm shitty, but who's gonna listen? Huh, not me, that's for sure." Story 49. 1. Nobody wants to hear it, even if they say they do. 2. They can't help you. 3. It's like asking to borrow money. It permanently changes the relationship dynamic, putting you in a position of weakness. 4. If they give you advice and you don't follow it, there will be resentment. If they give you advice and you do follow it and it doesn't work out, there will be resentment. 5 opens the door to endless complaining, which is a difficult habit to break. 6. You're disclosing protected information that person can abuse. The openness concept is probably part of the emotional intelligence learning journey that everyone goes through and experiments with. Story 50. As said by Bern Brown, they would all rather watch my die on my white horse than fall down. And it's not the coaches, or the guys, or the dads. The women in my life are harder on me than anyone else. And this whole thread just continues to reinforce this idea. My grandma just died. My wife burst into tears when she found out. All I could do was just stand there. On the best of days, I roll out of bed, let out a small sigh, go into my office and just get to doing. Because it's what is expected of me. And if I don't, if I show a small crack in the armor, it's over. I am now not productive and am a burden. And as I have learned my entire life, burdens are replaced, tossed out, they are not repaired. So, just like in my broken car, I put a piece of electrical tape over the check engine light and just keep moving forward like nothing is wrong. But I am tired. The engine is barely making it by on flat ground. Fingers crossed I don't come up to a hill, because if I do, I'm probably not going to make it up and I sure as can't ask someone to help me push. Story 51. The first time I cried in front of my girlfriend of 5 years after she explicitly told me that I should open up about my feelings more often, broke up with me that same night. LOL. Story 52. I was once in a pub talking with a girl. We were talking about jewelry. I took my ring to show her and it fell on the ground. We started looking for it, trying to move some furniture. Finally, people around started to notice and try to help to look for it. We described the ring, how it looked, etc. People turned on flashlights in their phones, etc. As soon as I said it was my ring, we looking for, not her, all help suddenly stopped. Like in 1 second, people went from let's help to I don't care. Story 53. I'm fine, because I don't want to talk about it because it would take more energy to talk than to relax and process the emotion. If I have any trouble processing the emotion alone, I'll let you know and we'll gladly talk about it. If you don't do this, I might recommend giving it a shot. It really helps you learn to cope with a lot of issues that turn out to be a lot of your own issues handling stressful situations. Story 54. Because if we say we're not, it's easy for some to treat us as Eeyores and not human beings with complicated inner lives. Millions of us were raised to grow up and toughen up. Be a man. Don't complain. Stop crying. Quit whining. And that pretty much just got us to the point where expressing ourselves was more or less discouraged, if not frowned upon. Story 55. Almost always, because if you say anything other than fine or good, it doesn't usually result in a positive conversation. Most people don't want to be emotionally dumped on, and society tends to expect us to keep our chin up. I still haven't figured out how to properly deal with my negative emotions, and it's killing me, frankly. Yes, I'm going to therapy. The American medical system treats symptoms, not causes, so I'm stuck with talking to someone who is just punching the clock and letting me go on about myself. I doubt they really care, and I don't blame them. They're doing their job. I'm not terribly interested in taking psychotropic drugs and further empowering Big Pharma. Are there plenty of ways for me to improve myself and self-treat? Certainly. It's my fault for not having the willpower to conquer my fears and quit nicotine, soda, and cut back on screen time, among other things. Really, I'm just extremely lonely. I was a NICU baby, and despite having a childhood that, on paper, was quite good, I have become aware of just how dysfunctional my brain is, and it makes every little thing into a struggle when it doesn't have to be. My emotions gyrate wildly. I'm extremely self-involved and have a hard time paying attention to anything that I'm not extremely interested in. I hope I can get out of my own head someday. Some days it's very nice in here. Other days not so much. I'm fine. Story 56. Because as soon as I start answering, it gets turned around about how the person listening has suffered through worse and what I'm feeling is not justified. Story 57. 2 reasons. First of all, unfortunately, no one cares about us. Second, we're solution-orientated. We like to fix things. If talking won't fix it, we won't talk about it. Story 58. It seems most men in here feel the same way. They feel that no one actually cares to listen. As a curious outsider, a woman, do you men care about each other? If you think a fellow male friend, family member, or coworker is having a hard time, do you care? Do you feel a pang of empathy and a desire to listen or be there for your male friends? Genuinely asking. If most men don't share their feelings because no one cares or wants to hear it, I am curious about the inverse. Does anyone in this thread feel empathy for other men and a desire to listen to them? If so, I wonder if everyone here is mostly being affected by toxic femininity in their lives and would actually benefit from talking to their male friends about their emotions instead of talking to women in their lives. Again, genuinely asking. Story 59 lol. I won't speak for everyone else, but for me I say, I'm fine when I'm not. If 1, I know it'll get weaponized against me at some point in the future. 2, I know I won't get anything but performative support from the person. I'm telling him fine. 3, I just don't want to rehash all of my stress to essentially provide an update that, yes, things are still rough. Conversely, I have 0 issues talking about my problems with my wife, who I trust completely. My family? No. To my family, I'm always fine, because nobody actually cares. It's trendy to say you care. It's trendy to encourage your man to be vulnerable. But you know what happens when we do finally choose to take the risk and be vulnerable? A. We find ourselves consoling others. B. We find our friends and partners pulling away. Don't you ever tell me you care? There's not a single soul on this planet that isn't paid by the hour that truly gives about what a man is going through. This is what life has taught me, and it's not for lack of trying. I've tried being open with those who say they care, and the only thing it brings is more pain and more isolation. Once the veil of invulnerability and tenacity is compromised, no one wants you. Stop kidding yourself, ladies. Once the genie is out of the bottle, we know it's game over for us. Imagine a world where just speaking your heart and soul means potentially sacrificing a relationship you cherish, because the other person isn't one I'm at that deeper level with or care to be. But if I go get a haircut and they ask me how I'm doing, I'll dump my miserable life on them till they're done. Story 60. I don't necessarily agree with the comments here. When I say I'm fine, either I'm not in the mood, or this isn't the place for that, or I can handle it on my own. Sometimes I'm just quiet and staring at a wall. If my friends ask me how I'm doing, genuinely, I know I can tell them. Story 61 Men. I've only heard this complaint about women. Generally, most men mean it when they say they're fine. If they say it's fine, they have a problem, but that means they don't want to talk about it. Story 62. Only person that cares is my wife, but I know most times there's nothing she can do to make me feel better. So I just did up to not bring her mood down until I feel better. Story 63. It's so exhausting mentally to explain all the, plus you got your own. And honestly, with my own, I can't give your the respect it deserves. So why should my matter? It's all the way down. Story 64. We're raised that our emotions don't matter, and that we must be the rock for women and children. Anything outside of that will be used against you. Not a real man. Harden up, I thought you were a man. Stop being a, you get the point. Story 65. Men are taught that our feelings aren't important from a young age. Women that say it's important we communicate our feelings often get turned off if we actually do display vulnerability. Men are supposed to be tough, and that doesn't fit the narrative society has painted us as. Why do you think men's mental health and suicide rates are sky high? Story 66. Because showing vulnerability opens us up to be raw and real, only to be told that our tears and needs are a turnoff. So we button it up and say, we're fine. Story 67. There's some variation, but almost universally, people have a desire to be understood. Guarantee every man was honest many times, and then learned from experience that no one gives a, and that sharing is very often a negative experience for everyone involved. People then pressure men to open up with theoretically good intentions. But it's honestly a bit insulting when people act like they know better than men's lived experiences. Everyone probably thinks they are different and actually care, because we like to think of ourselves as good people, and good people care. And you might even care about the man, but guarantee 999 out of 1,000 of you don't give a single about his problems. It's not entirely gendered. Everyone experiences that dynamic a bit, but I don't think most women can really comprehend just how much people do not give a why about men. Story 68. Wow, I'm only ever hearing that they want a solution to said thing. This is so far from the truth. Now there's a lot of times this is true. I'd say about 30-40, but the rest is, they need to be able to be vulnerable and comforted. But they probably don't realize that as they most likely have never had it. Most men in Western society are raised with this idea that they can't show weakness, ever, not even to the one they love most. Unfortunately, this idea has been reinforced by women who either lose respect, emasculated the man for being weak coward beta ECT, turned off and disgusted, or use this moment of vulnerability as a weapon against them. Typically in a few ways. 1. What you're saying is, hurting my feelings, and said, partner gets emotional and makes it about them. 2. We'll call it back up later. To humiliate the man. 3. To call the man weaker than he really is. 4. You're not who I thought you were. I'm done. I'm out ECT. But they don't want sympathy or pity. That's not what they really need. All they need. What is really desired more often than not is to know they don't always have to be strong all the time, that they can rely on you to be there for them, to be soft and gentle and caring. Men are pillars of strength. We can hold up the whole world for long periods of time and take an insane amount of external abuse and stress from the world. But there's times when we need a break to allow ourselves to truly let our guard down, to relax and let everything out, to know that you will have our back even if we are only human. Now, if you noticed I said external abuse, we have very thick armor around our hearts and we need it to survive in our modern world. But to the very few we take that armor off for and let inside, that's the most vulnerable and frightening place a man can allow someone to be. And unfortunately, they are normally betrayed time and again, over and over, relentlessly for years. Story 69. Honestly, several reasons. Personal experiences include 1. Weaponized against me. 2. Telling a partner, they get upset, and we need to then comfort them. 3. No one seems to actually care. Nothing changes when voiced. Conditioned to it up. Story 70. Because no one cares. No one. Even wives in GFS will just use that as ammo at the first opportunity. It's just not worth it to open up to anyone. They'll either mock you, ridicule you, or get the ick. So why even bother? Story 71. Because I feel nobody cares. I don't want to drag others' moods down with my problems. Also, if I'm dating someone and I feel comfortable enough to tell them about my problems, usually I don't because I don't want to be a mood killer. Additionally, I've told past girlfriends about my problems and they usually end up ghosting me or ending things soon after. Therefore, even when I'm not doing well mentally, nobody will know because I put on a facade. Unfortunately, this is life. Story 72. A close guy friend asked me a guy the other day what was wrong, and it basically amounted to, "You doing all right?" "No, not really." "Ah, what's going on?" "Ah, just the normal existential dread." "Ah, okay, but you're not." "Nah, nods." Nods. So, anyway, when are you getting on Battlefield? Story 73. Nobody ever really wants to know the truth if they ever ask a male that question. It's inevitably about them. So the only reasonable answer to that is, I'm fine. If I try to tell the truth, you'll just gaslight me and try to convince me it's not so bad anyways, so you with sand. I'm just always fine. Everything is always fine. Story 74. Because every time I do, the other person goes, at least it's not as bad as mine. So I'd rather not even talk at all. I'm good listener for others, but I don't get that back.